in a while pause and try to admit anyone that is still requesting access. But it's 9:05. So happy to be here with everyone, and I'm going to begin. I want to thank Dr. Lamia, Jen, Dr. Kaltenecker, Tim, Mr. Kelly Siebert, and I know that I saw Mia DiPietro here. I don't know if there are any other board members here. Mr. Ancona is here with us. A special guest, Mrs. Fuller's here. So thank you everyone for being here so that we can have a moment together to talk about HCC and e-learning. I'm going to share my tab, and again, I'm sorry for the delays that this will cause. And I'm going to present, and I hope this is working. So today's Principal Coffee is devoted to our e-learning at HCC. Our Principal's Coffee will talk about learning experiences for our students. What do they look like? It'll also speak about and cover and share with you e-learning systems and structures that we've developed at HCC. We have some questions that we have heard and thought that we would write them and share answers to. And we'll also then take questions from any parents or anyone who might have something that they need to know during the presentation. I know that Dr. Kaltenecker reminded everyone to please mute themselves. If you could do that, that would be great. And at the end, we're going to do questions. Everyone will stay muted, but we have a chat box. I'm going to go back to my mute for 1 second. Admit a few other people. I'm hoping, hold on, just as you see me stare at the screen, I am admitting. Wow, we're at 90. Okay, that covers it.
Kim, just so you know, when you do that, we could still see your screen, so don't worry.
Okay, but I want everyone to know I'm just not staring at the screen, like not knowing what to say, that I'm just trying to admit everyone into the meet. Okay, so let's start with middle school and what we know about our children. We know that in general, our middle schoolers are seeking independence. They want to make decisions on their own, academically, socially. They want to be given freedom to start determining their lives. We also know from brain research that as much as they want to do that, there's still parts of their brain that are developing and need time. And for that reason, we're at a crossroads where as much as they want to spread their wings and just fly and soar, and we want them to do that, they need our help still. And so that works wonderfully in the systems we've developed at the middle school, where we have teachers and parents and administrators and everyone working together in a partnership to support our students and our children. We have taken the time now to develop an e-learning system that can do that as well, because if you take a look, we're right at the crossroads in the orange and green, and all students are in a different place in their lives. Some need more support than others, some don't. But everyone needs a little bit something different from the parents and teachers in their lives. We've spent a lot of time in the last 2 months really learning about remote learning and what it means and the best way to provide that support and that experience to our children. Dr. Kaltenecker and Dr. Lamia have led the way, and through their support, the administration and teachers have come to understand that blended learning is truly the best practice that we should utilize to support our children. Blended learning encompasses 3 spheres. It encompasses real-time learning, like Google Meets and Zooms, and that's through a synchronous experience. And if you don't mind, I'm just going in to admit a few other people. We also have asynchronous experiences, and that would be the video recording that our Byram Hills teachers are making themselves, which is completely geared and crafted to support the skills and content that we must address in our curriculums. And then finally, the last sphere is interdependent work. And that's work, it could be taskless through IDE that we've learned about, but it's work that we are providing our students, again, developed for the most part by our teachers. It's scaffolded, it's differentiated at times, and the 3 spheres of these work together, and we seek to find the sweet spot in blended learning. I'm just going to go back and make sure. I thought I heard someone, yep, admit a few more people. We also know that in addition to this best practice of what blended learning should look like, there are 3 areas that we have to ensure we're addressing in this learning. We want to ensure that students are interacting with the content and the material. So that's learner to content. We also want to make sure that our students are interacting and supported by our teachers. And the last piece is that we want to make sure that our students are interacting with one another. So we have the 3 spheres of what blended learning looks like, and then we also have what we want to make sure that we address and support in a blended learning model. So now we have the privilege, and I can't thank some of our teachers for taking the time to share some of their teaching models and what they've done with us today. We will have a 6th grade science 2-day lesson shared with us by Mrs. Smith, who is videoed with Mr. Ancona, an interview. That will be asynchronous. Mrs. Iskovitz in 7th grade social studies will be sharing a group project for the next 2 weeks. So what does a group project look like in a blended learning experience? And then finally, Mrs. Fuller has been kind enough to come and be with us. I told her yesterday, I said, I think there's going to be 100 people. I'm really nervous. Are you okay? And she's so used to doing it in her classroom. She said, I got it, Kim, no problem. So she's here to actually share a unit and what a blended experience would look like in a unit in 8th grade in English. So this is where I need to be very thoughtful on how I transfer my screens. I'm going to mute myself.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Mrs. Smith, can you just tell us what you teach?
Hi, I teach 6th grade science.
Thanks.
Um,
And you're going to take us through a science lesson today.
yeah, so each week we post twice a week, Monday and Wednesday. So for Monday, we're posting work for Monday's work, Tuesday's work, and then Wednesday for the rest of the week.
Okay.
I'm going to show you what a typical task sheet looks like. And when we were thinking about how to do this, hold on. There we go. We thought of a task sheet like this from a PBL class we took with Nancy Sula. And we thought it looked nice and clear with an introduction and then some tasks that the students are required to do.
Okay. So I see that you have spread your tasks over, it looks like 2 days, right?
Yeah, so for this task sheet, it is a spread of 2 days and some assignments that the kids can do over the 2 days. And we did kind of allow them to work at their own pace. And we're seeing that kids are able to do that.
Okay, and then at the end of this, I see that on the side it says required. There are 4 things that are required for kids, 4 tasks. And then there's this optional piece. What is the optional piece for?
So the optional we decided to add on because some kids work at different paces, and if some are done, then they can choose to do the optional or challenge type questions. And we just felt this gave some flexibility for kids who needed some additional work.
So I see that you have a lot of different methods on how you're teaching kids there. Can you just tell us what some of those methods are?
So sometimes we record lessons that we're teaching and present them on here. This time we have a video that we're presenting them with and some slides, and then an assessment with a Google form. It's just a check-in to see if they're understanding what they watched and what they looked at with the lesson, with the slides. And then we added an optional in task 3. So they can choose mild, spicy, or hot if it gets a little easier to do, and then more challenging or more, in this case, they would have to do more at home to build or to do this activity, this little sort of lab that they get to choose from. And then they're going to present it on something called a Flipgrid, which it takes short little videos of the kids doing the activity, and then they have to explain what they did and what it means based on the topic. So it's another way that we can assess that they're understanding what we've been doing. And I'm also able to see what they're doing. It's nice to see them. And the other students can also access these videos of other kids. So it's nice that they get to review the material and see their friends and classmates at the same time.
Nice. So how have you checked for understanding, that students are actually understanding this material as we move forward?
A couple of ways with those Flipgrids and Google Forms as well. We also have been using IXL. We do have access to a science IXL, and these Quizlets that you can see is a way that we can check in to see how they're doing. I've also assigned some Newsela, which are reading-based quizzes, so we could see how they're doing reading in the content area also.
What are you finding are the challenges with this e-learning environment?
So we're definitely finding, obviously, technology issues are the biggest problem and challenge we're having. Wi-Fi issues for me or for other students. We've been doing check-ins twice a week, which usually is a Google Meet, where the students are logging in to meet with me, which is great because I can help them. They have questions live, but sometimes there's, it's slow internet or people getting disconnected. So that's been the biggest.
Just one last word. What do you want to tell your students?
I want to tell them that we miss them, and I would rather be in school with them, teaching them, but they're doing really well. And I know this is hard for all the kids and parents, so we really do appreciate all the hard work everybody's putting in.
Thank you. And we appreciate everything that you and our 6th grade team members are doing as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Kim, you're on mute.
Thank you. So going back to what we were beginning and talking about blended learning, there's synchronous, asynchronous, and interdependent work and support being provided. We have students experiencing the content, working with teachers, and also working with one another, sharing Flipgrids with one another. So Mrs. Iskovitz and Mrs. Higgins and also Mr. Benowich had spent time developing a legacy project in 7th grade social studies. And Mrs. Iskovitz is going to take us through this project, what it looks like, and what the experience will be like for students. I do want to just let everyone know a few things. Number one, we're going to share the slide presentations to everyone in an email later. So if there's something you've missed, please know that the presentation, or at least the slides, will be shared. And any questions that are asked in the chat, we will be able to address at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to change screens. I'm going to mute myself. I'm an extrovert, so I have to talk through most of what I'm thinking.
Hi there. The work you see in front of you is that of Tristan Eaton. He's an LA-based street artist who uses his art to showcase so many of the reforms and movements that have taken place throughout history. He's our inspiration for the Legacy Project, a virtual art gallery that 7th grade students are currently working on. This project really began with our study of slavery. While students learned about the history of slavery in America, they also learned about the abolitionists, about those who either experienced it firsthand or simply saw it and said, "This is not okay. We cannot allow this horrid practice to continue." These people, the upstanders, are the ones responsible for beginning the movement to end slavery in America. And we use them as a model to teach students that there are reformers and upstanders throughout the world. They exist today, they've existed throughout history, and they exist in all parts of the world. That takes us to the Legacy Project. On Monday, students Zoomed with their classes to learn a little bit more about this project, and then to talk to each other, to brainstorm ideas as to who they could study, reformers that are out there. We gave them a few restrictions, but generally said, find someone you're passionate about, find a cause you care about, and let's learn about the reformer who's working to get that to change. Students are now working on guided research. Through Google Classroom, they're researching not only their reformer, but they're also researching the cause or injustice that that reformer is working for or towards, and the movement that has grown out of that work. So they're really getting a whole picture of what this person is really doing or has done, since they can be doing anyone from the 1800s on. Next week, with the help of Mrs. Brooks and Mrs. Bergelson, students will take what they've learned and turn it into an art project. Just like you see here with Harriet Tubman, we've taken her portrait, but honored her legacy by showcasing so much of what she did, in her case, to help with the Underground Railroad and the abolition of slavery. Students will do the same. Using technology and the art that Ms. Bergelson will teach them, they're going to remove parts of a portrait and replace them with things that really showcase the legacy and work of the reformer they've chosen to study. Ultimately, we're going to put it all onto a Padlet. The beauty of Padlet is that each student can post their work, and they can also post an audio, video, or written piece that they write to tell their viewers about the reformer, about the movement, and about the legacy they're choosing to display in their piece of art. Students will then be able to view each other's work. They'll be able to comment and give feedback, and really look at the reformers that have existed throughout all parts, hopefully be inspired not only by what they've learned about their own reformer, but about the power of one person or the power of a group to really evoke change against things that are wrong. We know that students are craving more engagement, more creativity, and more opportunities to work with their peers. Coming soon, students will be able to work with a partner to master a topic and teach it to the class, as well as complete a group project for the Civil War that will hopefully be binge-worthy. Thanks so much for taking a peek into 7th grade social studies. We're hoping to see some great art soon.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen? The principals, no. Okay, so hold on one second.
Tim, can you also go in the chat box? There was a question that turned into, I think might be a multi-layered question for you to answer over time. Kim can keep going, but at some point I'd like maybe for you to address the question if you can.
Dr. Kaltenecker,
Sure.
do you want to take
Yep.
a moment? Mute.
Oops, I don't want to interrupt your flow, Kim. Go ahead with this. I'll come back to it.
You sure? Okay. So again, it hits the what we know is critical in a blended learning experience, and what we know our children must have when it comes to the content experience with their teacher and their peers. Finally, now this is the trickiest part right now. I'm going to hand over this the Google Meet to Mrs. Fuller. So what I have to do is I have to, again, notice the extrovert talking it through. I'm going to admit someone in. I'm going to stop presenting. I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to Mrs. Fuller.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi. I'm happy to be here today. What I would like to do is just talk a little bit about a unit of study through distance learning that Janine Capello, Megan DiDomenico, and John Van Alstyne, we all worked together to create. So before we left for distance learning, we were really working together. The focus of the 8th grade ELA curriculum is really to analyze text, to discuss text, and to write about text, and to really think about author's purpose. And so we really created a story this year of, the story of telling our curriculum. So once we got out to distance learning, we needed to try to figure out how can we do what we were doing in the building, while we were not in the building. And so we realized that while we might not be able to do the exact same texts that we were doing while we were there, ELA is very skill-based. So no matter what the text is, we're still targeting those reading, writing, and speaking skills. So I'm going to just take a little bit of time to kind of walk you through this new unit. So I'm going to try to present my screen. So just give me a second, please. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so basically, once we got out to distance learning, you know, we are working together, we're taking professional development, we're discovering innovative ways to use technology so that we can continue to engage with the HCC community, but just through a different medium. And through that different medium, we're able to create a community, we're able to relay information, and we're able to guide the students, you know, not in exactly the same way, but we're still getting those same skills just through a different medium. So what we decided to do was, since we're not using the same text that we were using in school, we needed to help the students to select a book. And we were excited about this because the students were able to kind of think about what book would interest them the most. So we realized we needed to help them to do this because they couldn't go to a library. So we needed to help them. How are they going to do this? So with the help of Barbara Barthelmess and Dwayne Smith, we did an early launch of our summer reading website. So this is what the students got. Sorry. So basically, this is the summer reading website. So the students had, if they clicked on either one of these lists over here, there were lots and lots of book suggestions for incoming 6th graders, incoming 7th graders, and 8th graders. So there's different levels of reading just within those lists. And then within those lists themselves, there were different levels of reading as well. There's also the YALSA Book Award list. So there's a ton of book selections there as well. But then we needed to figure out, well, how are they going to get these books? So through the library, Barbara Barthelmess put together some great instructional information as to how to access ebooks through our Follett shelf and also through the Sora app. And Kindle also is doing, I think, a 2-month free Kindle Unlimited, and Audible is doing something similar to that. So once we got the students up and running with their books, then they needed to read. So the students were given about 2 weeks to read their book, and each day we presented them with points to ponder to help them focus their attention on a specific reading skill. So we used Flipgrid to engage the students. Each day we posted a new video. This is what the Flipgrid would look like. So right now, all of the videos are up there because we're at the end of the unit, but that was not the case. It was each day they got a new video. So one day it was about symbolism, one day it was about metaphor, one day it was about imagery, and they're quick 3 to 4 minute videos. And they we were hoping that they would watch that video whenever they had a chance to, and that would give them a lens through which they could do their reading for that day. So in addition to that, while they were doing their reading, they also had some writing assignments that they were doing. So throughout that week, those 2 weeks, students were giving writing assignments, and the writing assignments focused on literary elements, and they also worked as scaffolding for their final project. We had live Google Meets to review the writing skills and the models for writing techniques and strategies. So this is a really good example of how we're still teaching the same writing skills. We use a lot of modeling in 8th grade for teaching writing. And so this is what the writing assignment looked like. And on the left is the prompt, and on the right is a sample. So in a Google Meet, I would give them something like this. I would present my screen just like I'm doing it here. And we would go over what the structure looks like. What are some of the writing skills that are being used here? On the left, you could notice that, you know, I'm kind of pointing them in the direction of, remember when we were in school and we were working on these things, these skills, here's what it should look like. So kind of reminding them that what they were doing and what they were working on is still what they should be working on now. So those were the 2 writing assignments. And then finally, we are ending with our final project. That final project is where students are going to put together a movie trailer about their book using either WeVideo or iMovie. A typical post on Google Classroom would look something like this. And this is where we give the students the information. So here's a post for the final project. The directions are there. We made a short video. This would be like an asynchronous way they can watch this whenever they want to, how to put the movie trailer together. We used Edpuzzle to pull in a movie trailer and do a voiceover to kind of show them where the different parts are. And we had tutorials for WeVideo as to how to use it. And then ultimately what we're hoping to do is to finally have a virtual viewing party at the end. So we're hoping to do that on Monday, where we're going to invite all of the classes together. Brian Melso from Bobcat TV is helping us put together a medley of the movie trailers, and we're hoping that we will get kind of a sense of community, bringing the kids all together and having a big celebration of their project.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Fuller. Really appreciate this. And again, if you take a look at what we want blended learning to be, this captures all of that blended learning together, and it also captures the 3 elements that we know are essential.
Kim, I can jump in too and address the questions. I think it's jumping in after those 3 examples is terrific. And I do want to acknowledge that there were some questions in the chat about the structure and whether having class a couple days a week where the teacher's meeting with them. And let me address that. But I think I want to acknowledge that this remote teaching is certainly not the ideal in K-12 schools. We know there are real challenges, and you know, our best work is when we're in school with our children and the systems that we built up there. So I do want to acknowledge that. What we have learned is that these 3 components that Kim outlined first is that we know works with student learning in a remote situation is we have to engage kids with content, we have to engage kids with the teacher, and we have to get kids engaging with one another. And these 3 examples highlighted how teachers are doing that. So the question about why we don't have a typical school and recreating our school schedule in a remote situation is that we just don't believe that's the best way kids learn. There are challenges with live sessions. We have, for teachers who have done it, there's always technology issues that get kids who can't access it. There's bandwidth issues from home. You're also missing that interaction. Like right now when I'm presenting, there are some contents, and teachers are using this, as you saw in the examples, where presenting some information can work well in this type of situation and providing some overall context for kids. But I cannot interact with kids. Teachers do their great work by working with kids and breaking up that lesson into little bits of pieces where they interact with them. They provide individual feedback. They respond to kids' needs that are coming up in those in the moment. When we think about direct instruction, this is a platform that can be good for direct instruction, but direct instruction makes up a very small part of our day. If you think about a 45-minute period in a classroom, you know, maybe somewhere between 7 to 10 minutes might be direct instruction. And then the teacher carefully breaks that up into tasks that kids engage with one another, they engage with the teacher, and they engage with the content in their classrooms. So we're taking that and translating that to this type of remote environment. So having a Zoom class for 45 minutes isn't necessarily the best way to engage students during that period of time. You know, we recognize the challenges with organization, and we did provide some information and webinars to help students organize and structure their time. I think that's a real issue, and particularly with middle school students who might have some underdeveloped executive function skills in that prefrontal cortex. And we do recognize that. And I think helping students be organized and reflective and pausing and thinking is something that we're also having our teachers help kids with throughout the day. So I think I'm trying to give that big picture context of our philosophy and approach to what we believe is the best learning for kids given this situation. Yeah, I think that's it for now, and I can answer more questions too later. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Thanks, Tim. I'm going to share my screen again, and we will. And then at this point, I would also, Mr. Ancona and I would like to share the e-learning systems and structures that we have in place. I know that Tim had just mentioned how in the middle school their brains are still developing, and we recognize that the executive functioning, it's really hard for them. And quite honestly, there's a lot that the school during a school day helps support our students in developing those organizational skills. So how do we do that as when we're not physically sharing the same space? I know that everyone's familiar with this. I just want to make sure I took a moment to review it with you. When you look at a typical e-learning schedule, this is grade 7 for an example. I know that everyone, or I think everyone's aware of the time that the team has with their students, the actual team 7A or 7B, the grade level teams. During that time, you've seen the different lessons and the different experiences our children might have. In addition, you will notice that there are other times during the day that live experiences with their teachers are available. In physical education on Mondays, Mr. Ripa, Mrs. Ladorette, Ms. Ryan, and Mr. Christian are available. In talking about the best way to support our students, students are right now completing a log in physical education where they're completing it and the teachers are interacting with them, giving them comments and feedback back and forth. I know the teachers have really enjoyed it and in some ways have learned more about their students because they've been able to have individual connections and comments on the log. But more importantly, if students wish to meet with their physical education teacher to go over a particular technique that they're trying to develop in a volleyball serve, or if they want to talk about a physical education goal that they're working towards, they can do that on that Monday. Tuesday, we have music ensembles, and depending on the music and what each child is participating in, there will be a live session as well. World language has asynchronous and synchronous experiences, but I know that each teacher is spending time meeting and working with the students live. And then on Fridays, oh, and actually I didn't circle art and health on Wednesdays. On Wednesdays and Fridays, there is for art live sessions. I know Mrs. Bergelson usually and Mrs. Manoli have longer sessions one day and then maybe a 20-minute check-in the other day. And then on Fridays, we also wanted to provide an opportunity for our students. So if you're in 6th or 7th grade, you can actually do some enrichment with Mr. Sinlensky or Mrs. Barthelmess. There'll be a choice. We're rolling out Mr. Sinlensky's enrichment this Friday. And for all grades, Mrs. Barthelmess is there live. And also it is asynchronous as well if children want to do something different for the day. Sorry, I think someone's knocking at the door, so I just want to check. There is. Okay. Another thing that we've rolled out, and Mr. Ancona and I thought this was a really good time to share and make sure everyone was aware of this. There's something called Bobcat Corner that we developed. Last week, we rolled it out. It is a structured time, an environment virtually where there are adults to help guide and answer questions that students might have. So during team check-in times, if there is not a live session or if a live session ends, students may go to something we're calling the Bobcat Corner. We got that name because of the corner in the cafeteria, the Kerfeteria, where we did allow Chromebooks. But then we also have a time where they can meet and do work at the end of the day. You need to request that to become part of the Bobcat Corner. You have to ask you for a link each day. At this point, we're going to have students we can let 20 students in and have some structured time if that's what they would like to do. If students are needing that support, we offer it directly to them. We'd like to also just review the portal. We've always, the parent portal through eSchool has always been available, and parents have been utilized it to check their children's progress and learning through grades. With e-learning, we've shifted that focus to feedback on assignments. So if you visit the portal, you will see that after March 13th, there is a shift in what is visible. It moves from grades to these codes. So teachers will put the assignment in a column, and then they will provide you with information about the quality of the assignment your son or daughter did. It could be exceeds expectations, meets expectations, or below expectations. If your child did not submit something, there's an NS for not submitted. In addition, we wanted to make sure we distinguish the difference between the quality of work and if something was late. Because in this environment, a child might be submitting something late because they had struggle organizing and they're not with us in school. There might be something going on in their lives that has delayed them and made it, and they aren't able to complete the work on time. So we didn't want the quality and the assessment of that work to be impacted by if an assignment is late. But we did think it was important that parents know if something was handed in late. You know what's going on in your child's life. So there is a comment box next to the code, and you will notice that there would be a comment if your child handed something in late or if the teacher wanted you to know something. And then finally, we really appreciate the feedback from our students. We did a student survey and we received over 200 responses from our students. We appreciate the information and the guidance and the feedback we've received from parents over the course of time, and teachers as well. We've developed something called, and we're rolling it out today, the e-learning portal. And it is really one-stop shopping for the middle school. We will tweak it as we go along, but basically, if you look at the screen, you can access this by going to the district webpage, barhamhills.org, go to HCC, our webpage, and this will now show up. If you notice, there are 3 categories we felt were important to highlight. We asked that there would be a place that you can find your child's schedule for the week in their grade level teams and for live meets, because we know that there were a lot of live meets going on and we didn't want anyone to miss it. We also know how hard it is to organize assignments, so we asked the grade level teams to provide a link that takes you to where the assignments are, your child to where the assignments are. And then we heard a lot from people, and I know that all of our children are experiencing e-learning differently. We're hearing some are overwhelmed and some students are underwhelmed. We're hearing that some enjoy asynchronous and some enjoy synchronous. What the Enrichment Opportunity tab is to help differentiate for parents and students. If they're done with their assignments and they want more, department chair people work with their departments to develop an enrichment page, which provides multiple opportunities for your child to explore what they enjoy. So just to walk you through it, actually, I'm going to pause. There's also, because there are live meets and because all this information is one-click stop shopping, the truth is we need to make sure that it was protected as well from anyone who's not in the Byram Hills community. So later this afternoon, you will receive a code, a password, so that when you first initially click into that e-learning banner, it will ask you for a code. You will always have the same code, and that will then give you access into this information. So it is password protected. Please make sure that if you don't mind, you keep it within the family, and we don't want, just for the safety and security of our children and our staff. So if I did go, and I'll change my tab to schedules, this is what you would see. And say I clicked on 6A. If you are 6B or 7A, you do need to use the Chrome browser so that you're logged into your student's account. Those 2 teams use Google Classroom, which requires students to log in. 6A, 7B, 8A, and 8B use a Google site that does not require the password. As we know, each team works together, and they have systems that we've tried to honor and keep in place as we've moved forward. So this is consistent with how students have been accessing their information to date. So if we
Hey,
yes.
Kim, is it safe to assume, I'm looking at this from a parent lens, and then I would be like copying all of this down and wondering how to do this. So it's safe to assume, though, that each of these teams are going to send out appropriate information, or parents can get in touch with specific teams if they have other questions, right? So, it's not.
Yes,
right?
I would suggest that if you have questions after this, we'll send out directions on how to use the e-learning tab. We'll send out the password. I would say this was more created. The e-learning portal was created by Mr. Ancona and I. So questions about the e-learning portal should come to us. If there's any specific questions on how to access Google Classroom for a specific team, yes, please reach out to the team. But it is no different than what they have been practicing throughout the year and through our e-learning experience. So we haven't changed anything. We've just added direct links to take parents and students where they need to go. But any questions, you can start with Mr. Ancona and I, and then move over to the teams if necessary.
And Kim, regarding questions, I'm following the questions in the question box and copying them down to see if what questions will still remain at the end of your presentation to bring to you to answer, because some of them you're addressing and I don't want to stop you and ask questions that you may be addressing. So just so parents know, I'll try to monitor that, or if you want to wait until the end to see if the question's not answered, is a good time to put your questions in.
And unfortunately, I can't see them right now. All I can see is the screen. So yes, when we go back, any questions unanswered, I'd be happy to answer. So just quickly finishing this piece, and I don't want to go too quick. So when you get to this next screen, you would click on your team. If we did 6A, this is the link that they've used all year, but it takes you directly there. But the big difference is we've asked each team to develop a weekly live meet schedule. And once you click on the check-ins, you would see the schedule, and there are links attached to the schedule. So it's one-stop shopping. You would do the same thing for the assignments. And then the enrichment is self-explanatory. You would go to a discipline and you can review the resources provided. This was, again, developed in order to help with our kids' executive functioning and keeping organized, as well as for parents to help their children, because we know this is where it intersects. And right now they're trying to break free, and we know that they need our assistance. So I know this has been a little long. I'm going to go through these quickly, but again, not too quickly. I know that everyone's heard and we've learned how important it is to have learning spaces in a daily schedule. Want to reinforce some specific things for our middle schoolers that we want to suggest. Please make sure they check their email and their Google Classrooms daily. They can do that now through the e-portal, and they can just keep the habits that they've been doing as well. Encourage your child to advocate for their learning. Some parents have shared with me, well, my child doesn't really feel like they need to ask that question, or my child is uncomfortable going to an optional meet, or I'm not sure if they should go to an optional meet. The answer is they should. In those optional meets, they're optional partly because if there's an internet issue, or if a child doesn't have access for some reason to attend that meet, we don't want to add to their stress level and anxiety. But if possible, children should always attend extra help or those optional meets, and teachers want to hear from them. If there's a question that they have, an email is fine, or go to an extra help session. Our children also can reach out to a friend or classmate. Those are many times that student-to-student interaction is quite important, and that's how kids can help each other. And then communicate with a teacher or guidance counselor for support. They can email, or myself, Mr. Ancona, the teacher, the guidance counselor. We are all here to help. I would also suggest that you talk to your children about e-learning, how it's going, what's most challenging, and set a very specific goal for the following week that they can work towards. Encourage your child to take healthy risks. Participate in a Google Meet. One of the challenges that I learned about through the Google Meets or the Zooms is that in middle school, you think about how self-conscious our children are and how awkward they can be at times and how wonderful they can be at times. Imagine that instead of being in a classroom where you're looking at the teacher, you're at your computer screen staring at yourself, and you're staring at all the people, all the other adolescents that are there with you, that you're still trying to figure out agency of how to work and how to interact with your teacher and your peers. But encourage them to take a chance, attend the meet, ask one question, provide a comment, put a comment in the chat, ask them if they want to attend the Bobcat Corner. That's an opportunity for some structure if they're finding that they need structure for themselves. And reach out to a teacher about a creation, a new learning. I know that, again, a physical education teacher really was so excited that they had had this conversation through the physical education log about some things that their students were doing. And the art teachers are sharing some of the amazing work that their children are sharing with them. And the last piece I want to just remind everyone, I lived it, is the downtime is important. I'm so used to scheduling my own child, and the other day I realized how important downtime is for him. I wouldn't let him on the electronics. I said, figure out what you're going to do. He is younger, but it was amazing to watch what he did. He became a little curious and creative. And from the Encyclopedia Brown books that he had listened to, all of a sudden he's outside on our front porch, and he had made a sign with our help that said Lappel Detective Agency. And he was waiting for customers to answer questions and solve cases. We gave him all the cases, and he did talk about social distancing, but it amazed me that when I let him be a little quiet and have some downtime, what his curiosity and his creativity, what it created. And this last piece, again, we're going to share all of this, and there are links embedded in this. But for the question and answers, will HCC move to more live classroom sessions? I think Dr. Kaltenecker and we know the importance of a very strong blended learning experience. Do I think that teachers are going to continue to meet live? I do. I do think that they will increase opportunities to see students and connect with students. But they're also going to develop these fabulous asynchronous videos that are really directed towards supporting the skills and the content that our students need, and giving them scaffolded assignments and differentiated assignments so that students can be challenged with support. How can I help my child organize themselves? The e-learning portal, we hope, is helpful. Please send us any feedback you have in case we have to tweak it. We have the Bobcat Corner. And then I know that the Google notifications is quite difficult if you, in your settings, has it that you're receiving notifications constantly. I had been, and I can't tell you how much I knew about the art classrooms. So we've added a link to this. Mr. Ancona had put a presentation on how to manage those Google settings better, and you can turn them off or turn some of them off depending on what your child or your needs are. We spoke about, recently we sent out information about the acceleration process from 7th to 8th grade in science and mathematics. Has it been modified to align to e-learning? The short answer is yes, it has. There's a link right here that we had sent out about how the math and science specifically have changed the process. But what I can tell you is that we will utilize the first and second quarter because we know so much about our children and their work through that. But most importantly, we're going to rely on data such as the habits that our children are showing, the behavior habits, their learning habits that are all outlined in the science and mathematics documents, and whether students are working independently. Is their work timely? Is it thorough? Does it show that ability to make connections across content? Those are outlined in the document. We will be in touch in June. If you have any questions, you can ask. And we also are keeping in mind that the start of 8th grade, there will need to be flexibility. We believe strongly in our data and how we place our children, but this is a whole nother experience, and we do not want anyone to be negatively impacted from it. So we will be in touch. We will share this acceleration process. Teachers will be in touch with you later in late May and June. And we will take into account in 8th grade an opportunity for students to move between the two courses if we think our placement was inaccurate. It's all about making sure our students are challenged and supported and in the right place. And then finally, moving forward for 4th quarter and for final grades of the year, we're going to be determining that in the next week or two, and we'll be reaching out with more information.
Kim, there was a question about the pass-fail for 3rd quarter, if we can address our rationale for that. And I could just say that our philosophy with grading has been, we recognize that this is an extremely different type of learning for kids that may not be used to it. And we had to make modifications to the curriculum and our content and obviously the instructional methods. We do not believe that. We also recognize that families are going through a lot during this pandemic, and some families may have some real issues at home that are preventing kids from being as engaged as they normally would be. So in recognizing that, our approach of that, no student should be harmed by our grading process, and we want to be as open and flexible as possible with that, and recognizing we cannot grade the same way we were grading when we were in school. So that's our rationale. That's guiding our part of the rationale guiding our decision in terms of our grading policy.
And just to add on to that, many times students, middle school is such a learning experience that if they had not performed as well as they wanted to initially when they were in school, normally if they had remained in school, they would have worked with the teacher daily and learned how to address what was missing. It could have been going during lunchtime. It could be attending before school. There would have been opportunities for our children to grow and learn from that experience of maybe falling behind or not doing as well on a certain assignment or developing their skills. That was limited, and we also felt that e-learning was so overwhelming to begin with. We didn't want to ask students to go back and make up any of the work. And this, we felt, was the best balance, considering a child's social emotional component as well.
Kim, there were a couple of other questions, 2 questions in particular that were asked about portal feedback being confusing, or how often is enrichment updated. I think that if you have specific questions like that, the best thing to do is to go directly to the individual teacher. So if you want to know how often enrichment is updated, I think the question should be, when is it going to be updated again because my child's been doing it and now needs new assignments, right? So, just have it saying it's updated once a week doesn't meet the needs of individual children. So it's so important from a parent perspective that you reach out to teachers, let them know where your kids are. If the enrichment has not been updated, meaning your child has exceeded what that enrichment is, then ask for more. Your teachers would be happy to give more. Just putting something on a schedule like that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to meet the needs of your child. You really do have to articulate for that help. For portal feedback being confusing, that's a great thing to share with Kim and Angelo. If you could actually contact them to talk about when you're entering, why it's confusing, all of that information just helps us improve systems. So I think a question like that requires a lot more questioning on the part of Kim and Angelo to parents to see what that is like from a parent perspective. It could be your own situation, or it could be something that could affect others. So just having more of a dialogue with you individually, I think would help to better answer that. There was a question, if you're using the e-portal, Kim, do you still need to check the parent portal?
Yes, so that's a great question. There are 2 different portals. The e-portal is really just helping to organize the live meets, the assignments given, and opportunities to find enrichment and differentiated assignments. The parent portal is specific to eSchool, where teachers will be putting in how your child is doing based on the assignment. So they will list the assignment, it will have codes, and you will be able to see the quality of work your child is doing and if they submitted it and if it was late.
And the other 2 pieces so far that I have are really about face-to-face, required, and the optional. There's a lot of question about that. And again, I just have to encourage individual parents, reach out to individual teachers. If you think your child needs more face-to-face during the course of a week and you explain that to your teacher, they're going to help to meet your child's need, right? But simply prescribing it across the board doesn't necessarily meet all of the different times kids are trying to learn and ways kids are trying to learn. But very much appreciated feedback, and teachers will be really responsive to whatever your child needs. So definitely please do that. And the how to motivate students to do extra is also, and putting your child on a schedule is also something that either an individual teacher or the guidance counselor could be the best help with. Many children need a schedule. Remember, we are working behind the scenes to help parents. So if you said, this is not working for us, my child needs some support, can a guidance counselor meet with my child online to help them structure something? Because as parents right now, this isn't working for us. You will get that support in the schools if you ask for your individual child. We'll try to help set up a structure that works for you and your family. But keeping in mind that other people have very different structures that are happening with parents working in the house and other children who are doing assignments. So I hope that that helped with some of the questions. All right, so far. Keep going, Kim.
That's it. I don't know if there are any other questions that you want me to address. I looked at the chat and I don't see many more. But yeah,
I'm sorry, Kim. I can add, I posted a few resources, some enrichment resources that are on our district website. There was the how-to video on how to access our parent portal and instructions there for parents who might need those instructions. And also our English chairperson posted some resources around reading, writing, and listening, which is also accessed on our resource page.
So yes, and I am going to share this presentation with everyone, and at the end of the presentation, we will add those links as well.
Great.
Okay. Dr. Lamia, I think I'm handing this over to you now for your budget presentation.
Okay.
Is that correct?
And Kelly Cyber. Thank you, Kim. Thanks for all of that. And parents, thanks for really good questions. I think you've realized by now that it doesn't matter what grade your child is in, your feedback is really important to how we shape this. We are understanding that everybody's situation is very different, and in any way that we can do what we can to help you figure it out for your home, we're happy to do that. Or, tell you, ways to keep your child motivated. These are very, very difficult times for parents. And now, not knowing until Friday, we think Friday, whether schools are going to remain closed for the remainder of this school year, you start to look at your own children and wonder, what is the next step? What is the next phase of our life experience at home doing e-learning and doing everything else? So lots of transition times. I want to recognize the parents who are here today, because this is an incredible stress on parents. You're watching your children miss these amazing milestone times in their lives. You're watching them miss friends or miss contact with people, even if they're not kids who are typically surrounded by friends, missing that contact. We need to know that. In schools, when we walk around, we see the children who are struggling. It's really apparent to us. Students who maybe aren't interacting with other kids as much, students who are struggling with content. It's so much harder for us to see that when they're in your homes. We need you to tell us. And we're happy to make whatever changes we can to make sure that we can support you. So thank you for that. Right now, we have gone from 105 participants to 82 right before the budget, and that is okay. I first want to say that if people choose to click off on this budget, because I respect that you have your own work and families to manage, I understand that. I just would like to leave people before they click off with a few very important notes about the budget. The first important note about the budget is that our Board of Education is continuing to look at that budget. Many other districts are looking to adopt their budgets in the next 2 weeks or so. Byram Hills Board of Education is waiting to approve a budget to go forward for a vote, because we feel, and our Board of Education has been very helpful in this matter, that we need to continually look at the budget and make adjustments commensurate with what's going on in the world today. Right now, very proud to say that we are going out with a 0% budget-to-budget increase for Byram Hills. And that although our permissible tax cap levy was at 1.54%, that the Finance Committee and Audit Committee have met numerous times, moved the 1.54% to a 1.4%, and then moved it to 1%. So the board is just continuing to hammer away at that budget to be responsive to people in this community and this financial situation that we are in. Knowing the behind the scenes of what the board is doing should give you a lot of confidence. As we approach this pandemic, the Finance Advisory Committee chose to have us look as a district and review all of our collateral information for banks we use, letters of credit, questions we need to ask about our accounts and federal backing on those accounts. We adjusted the budget to account for decreases in sales tax revenue that we are receiving. We look to scale back on any discretionary construction as a district. At one point we were looking to increase a lane at the high school. We simply cannot look to do those projects right now. Some things that have been approved by the state education department and were being fabricated already, we are continuing with. For example, we have Coman Hill windows replacement that's occurring. Those windows were fabricated, paid for, and approved by the state education department, and we're receiving aid back on those. So projects like that will continue. And of course, any projects that we need to keep our district in its top order. You may remember from past budget presentations that I've given that I have, given accolades to Byram Hills for maintaining our facilities and not needing to go out for bonds like other school districts to do roof repair or furnace repair. We have really done a great job in our facilities departments of keeping that up. So I have a lot of not only confidence in the budget that we're presenting, but I also feel that the position that the district is in is a very favorable one regarding the state of our facilities, that I don't see this being troublesome for us in how we are planning out the maintenance of our operations. So that is a good note. And I applaud the board for waiting to approve this budget, that they are considering and are being responsive to community need at this time. I think that that's incredibly powerful. I'm grateful that we have a Board of Education. We have two members here today, Lara Stengel and Mia DiPietro, with us. And I'm really grateful that our Board of Education has been very intent on the finances of this district, that this is not just Kelly Seibert and I having these discussions about finance with our auditors. We have people who are keenly aware of the financial worlds and markets who are helping to answer some really good questions for us. So moving ahead to the budget, Kelly, we can start with your presentation. I hope that helps. And if anybody needs to dip off, I actually get it. And we have these presentations on the website under the Board of Education. So if you're interested in looking at something later, of course you can. But Kelly, we can get started. I don't see your screen. Okay.
Nope.
Nope. I see your pause picture.
Hold on one sec.
So I think while I'm waiting for Kelly, you know, I look at the budget as, what does this mean to me as a taxpayer? What is so special about Byram Hills? You know, it was really nice to see U.S. News and World Report come out recently and rate Byram Hills 5th in Westchester, 22nd in New York, and, you know, just accolades in that department. We all know that that while it's nice to be in the top 5 in those ratings for Westchester County, that there are lots of considerations when you're putting together a rating system, lots of things that are left unsaid. Some very competitive school districts in Westchester County finding themselves very low on that list because of how that configuration was made. But when I think of it from a taxpayer's perspective, I look at what makes, where is this money going, right? And I look at the success rate of our students here in Byram Hills, with 99% of the students from the class of last year attending college. If you look at Tim Kaltenecker's special recognition document on our website, it shows a great change. You know, in 2001, and you may have heard me say this before, 20% of our students were accepted into Tier 1 schools. And 2 years ago, I boasted that that number hit 60%. And last year, that number hit 70%. And what that is saying to us is that colleges are recognizing the value in a Byram Hills education, and they're recognizing the potential in your children. So that is something for us to be proud of. If you look at our middle school alone, they rank number 1 in ELA, in grades 6 and 8 in the region, number 3 in grade 7 math for the region, number 1 in science for the region. These tests are important measures for us, and although we don't see these tests happening this year, and probably much to the excitement of your children, they do help us to assess our programs and make sure that we are giving children the content that they need. In addition to that content, though, I think what our budget really supports is opportunities for children. And what we hope and what the board endeavors to do is to never let these budgets affect the programs that will benefit your children and help them find the things that they're passionate about and interested in. While we can boast about these Tier 1 college acceptances, at the end of the day, it's that your child was able to have opportunities to find the things that interested them that can become these lifelong passions. And, you know, sometimes that isn't just about getting into that particular college. So Kelly, I see you're ready to start. Why don't we go to the first slide where we show the budget to budget increase. It's important to know Byram Hills had an advantage this year in this budget to budget increase. And that being that one of our bonds matured, expired, finished. So the money that typically would have been spent for that bond, which by the way, was taken out when I was a youngster in my 20s and we were doing expansions due to enrollment in Byram Hills. So interesting enough that now at age 52, I'm seeing that bond finally paid off. And that is what is allowing us to continue with percentage increases that we would have to see in things like fuel and anything else from year to year contracts, that we are still able to stay with a 0% budget to budget increase. That was fortuitous for the district. And what does it include? As I said, keeping all of our programs and services supporting student access, all of our athletic programs are remaining, extracurricular programs remaining, and transportation services. It's important to know that in my conversations with my colleagues in Westchester, many superintendents are reporting cuts to different extracurricular and athletic programs for next year because they are having to stay below their tax levy cap. Remember, our tax levy cap is at 1.54 and we're at 1% right now. Due to the falling off of that bond, we're still able to keep all of those opportunities together. So I feel that timing made it fortunate for anybody living in this community to make sure that your children had the same things that were available to them last year. And Kelly's going to help us get an understanding of the budget by component with program, capital, and administrative costs. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Jen. I apologize for that little hiccup with the presentation. So the district budget is formulated based on three components required by the state: a program, a capital, and administrative. Your program component is your biggest component for any school district. It includes your teachers, your librarians, your guidance counselors, psychologists, athletics, bus drivers, the majority of your staff. It includes their salary, their benefits, their supplies, material, equipment that they use on an annual basis. For any school district, it's usually between 70 and 75% of your total budget. For Byram Hills, it's 72.3%. Second highest is the capital component. This is salary and benefits and supplies and materials for our custodial and maintenance staff, just the overall upkeep and maintenance of our buildings, security costs, property insurance that we have, our utilities, debt service. That's what makes up the capital component of the budget. That's 16.3%. Again, obviously down from the prior year, as Jen spoke about how a debt expired, so we no longer have that payment. So that has decreased from the prior year. And then finally, administrative. This is our Board of Education meetings and budget vote, central office staff, other administrators, our legal counsel, our auditing services. So all the kind of administrative avenues that we have to do for a school district. That's 11.4%. In terms of by object, meaning what we spend it on, a school district is made up of our teachers and our staff. Our salary and benefits for our staff is 77.5% of the total expenditures. That's with any school district. You know, a school is made up of instructional staff and people that support that. The second highest category is contractual services. An easy way to think about this is anything that we don't do in-house, whether that be maintenance of a boiler or some professional development that's handled outside of our staff. That's 14.7%. Debt service, again, at 3.2%. Obviously, again, lower than it was last year. Supplies and equipment at 2.1%. Maintenance projects at 1.9%. Maintenance projects are the district does in-house all various projects, so we avoid another debt service payment. We avoid having to go to the voters for another capital project to maintain our building, renovate an area, remediate a mold, replace a boiler. It's built in the budget, so it avoids that unneeded cost of borrowing and interest associated with that. And then finally, 0.6 for vehicles. We have our own fleet of buses. We have a replacement schedule on those buses. So these funds are to replace buses that are past their, at the point of their last useful life, which is usually about 13 to 15 years. The revenue side, The largest portion of our revenue comes from our real property tax, 89%. Unfortunately, we only receive 5% in state aid. That's common with areas in the Westchester area. 3% for pilots, which is a payment in lieu of taxes. We currently have 2 pilots, IBM and Ingle Berman, still sitting out there. We had a pilot expire a couple years ago in Swiss Re. So we currently have 2 pilots sitting out there. Another 3% fund balance and reserves. In order to balance the budget, we do apply some reserves to balance the budget. And finally, 1% is other revenues. So what that revenue includes, and what Jen spoke about earlier, is essentially county sales tax that we receive from Westchester and our interest earning. The Finance Advisory Committee really did a commendable job this year, just kind of looking again and again at our finances and the budget and everything going on. Mia DiPietro, Scott Levy, and Mike Sanders really just been amazing partners in this process, really just looking at every detail and talking it over. And you know, we really value their expertise and their opinions on this, and I think it shows in this budget. When we started the budget, we had an assumption of county sales tax of $725,000. At that time, a little before January, we earned more county sales tax than the district's ever had. You know, things changed since January. So again, the Finance Advisory Committee met and talked about a reduction in our assumption for county sales tax for next year, which we did. We went from 725 to 543. And interest earning, and we were in the same boat. We were earning more interest than we've ever earned in a long time in the school district. And we made a decision in January to budget a little more in terms of interest earning based on the years that we've been earning the interest. Again, things changed. So we changed that assumption and dropped that down to $25,000. We continually talked about how the changes in the tax rate and the tax levy will affect our local taxpayers in each of our towns. And that's why we made the decision to our maximum allowable tax levy being 1.54%. We dropped that down to 1.4%, and we further met and further discussed. And right now we're at a 1% tax levy increase. And then Jen spoke about how we talked about all our banking institutions, make sure we were diversified, make sure that we had appropriate letters of credit with various banking institutions. And then again, holding off any building projects, non-essential building projects until further notice.
Kelly, it's also important to note that we've been told that we may be receiving up to a 20% or so reduction in state aid. When our state aid is at about $4 million, that's close to $800,000. That is pending these different measurement periods that we're going to be facing. And we will be meeting with the Finance Advisory Committee and then the Audit Committee to make adjustments that we need to make to our budget after hearing that news.
Right, we're holding off until mid-May to actually adopt the budget. So we'll have an opportunity to go back and make any adjustments that need be. So in terms of total revenues, as we spoke about earlier, our major portion of our revenue comes from our local taxpayer. At a 1% increase, that's $828,000. Our pilots did decrease. Our IBM pilot has a de-escalation clause, essentially. So next year, it's about almost a 6% decrease of $160,000 in terms of revenue for pilots. Other revenue, like we just spoke about, the county sales tax, the interest, we're projecting about a 7% decrease in that, about $75,000. State aid, a decrease of about 4.8%, $222,000. I need to put a caveat on that, because the district, as I spoke about, we no longer have a debt service payment. We had made the final payment of our bond this year, 1920. So we get aid on that. Any payment we make for debt service, we receive aid from the state. So next year, we're not going to have that payment. So we were kind of due a decrease in state aid because we don't have the payment to submit. So we're not going to get reimbursed the following year. So it may look like a large decrease in terms of state aid, but we were due is a weird way of saying it, but we were scheduled to not have an increase based on that factor alone. So at this point, it's a 4.8% increase. There's a lot of measurement periods that there potentially could be some additional cuts. And again, we'll readdress that before we adopt the budget in mid-May. And then finally, in order to balance the budget, it requires some fund balance and reserve allocation. It's almost $3 million. It's about 11% decrease from the prior year. So in terms of actual tax rates, right here, the majority of our property, 86% of the Byram Hills School District resides in the town of North Castle. And then obviously 0.6 Newcastle, 0.4 and 13% in Mount Pleasant. The tax rate increase for the majority of our residents will be a 0.34% increase, 2.39 from Newcastle, a 0.55, for Bedford, and then Mount Pleasant at a 3.58. Now it's important to take a look at the historical rates going back, and these rates really change based on assessed values in each individual town. If you take a look at my presentation from March 24th, it gives a little more detail in terms of those changes. But you will notice an increase in Newcastle and an increase in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant for the last couple of years has increased their total assessed value in the town, whereas for North Castle, Bedford, you've seen a decrease in assessed value. Even if we had a 0% increase, Mount Pleasant and Newcastle would still have an increase in their tax rate, just based on those changes in assessment. It's essentially a share of the tax levy. So as your assessment reduces or increases, your change of that share, your portion of that share changes. But if we look back historically, if you take a look at Bedford, you can really see those kind of changes. It started in the 15-16 school year. They had a large increase, 12% increase, and then they had a 4% decrease, one down, and then down a couple of years. Newcastle and Bedford, together it's about 80 properties. So those two towns, if there's a significant shift, if there's 4, 5, 6 houses that sell for significantly higher than their assessed value, it can have a huge effect on that change, on those individuals in that town, their tax rate. Other way around, if houses sell for significantly lower than their assessed value, it again can have a different effect. That's probably where we got to the negatives in these couple of years in Bedford. And then Mount Pleasant, through the last 5 years, it's really been less than a 2% increase in their share. But the last couple of years, as I spoke about, projected in next year and the year before, they've had increases in their assessed value for the town. So it has had a large effect in terms of the portion for Mount Pleasant. And again, it's at we're at 1%. If you look at 18-19, where it was 3.4, you did see some shifts towards the negative in Newcastle and Bedford. And again, it kind of fluctuates on a year-to-year basis based on that. That's why it's kind of hard to project the tax rate going forward because without knowing the assessed value adjustments. And assessed value is something that the district has no control of. It's controlled by the local assessor in each town, and it's developed based on physical changes and then sales of properties in each town. True tax rate. This data is a little flawed because 8 school districts didn't report their data. However, this is one of the areas where you want to be towards the bottom. True tax rate is essentially if you pick up your home and drop it into another school district or we're all school district together, what your rate would be. So we're down here at about $15.8 per 1,000 assessed value, which is really a great place to be in the kind of the bottom quarter of tax rates. So it really shows that the value associated with your tax rate. This slide kind of shows a little bit about how the tax levy can be, the maximum allowable tax levy. It's a long, boring mathematical equation that if you wanted to take a look at in January, I did a presentation based on it, on all the factors. And I think this slide really points out how it can really shift on a year-to-year basis. As you can see, our max 1.54, 1% we are at. The district has always been below our maximum allowable tax levy. It started in the 12-13 school year. And
Kelly, it's good also for people to realize that that's unusual. Most school districts in Westchester County will go up to their permissible tax cap levy.
Absolutely.
So not just this year thing, but the fact that our lines and our trajectory have shown this over a substantial amount of time are very significant.
Absolutely. And to that point, since the district has been below the maximum for the last since 2012-13, it's $2.6 million that has not been taxed, not been added on, that the district could have taxed, I guess, could have implied towards the tax levy. So again, that adds up on a year-to-year basis. It carries over all these years, and plus, percentage increase on a year-to-year basis of those savings. So it's something
So
to be.
my question might be, well, how come we're able to take off $2.6 million every single year from now on? Doesn't that mean that we've overtaxed before? So the answer to that is no. We had much higher enrollment at times when those percentages were there, and we've been adjusting for the enrollment decline that we had, and that's why we are not having to have that much burden go out to the taxpayers as much as we have had before. So just responsive to our enrollment decline.
And I would also say it's our maintenance of our buildings that we've done on a year-to-year basis. You see a lot of districts going out for bonds, huge bonds, because they've deferred maintenance to their buildings. They have issues in terms of boilers. They have issues with remediation that they need. I think that's a big portion of it as well. It's something that's very valuable to maintain your buildings. It's one of the 2 or 3 most important things, I think, for a school district, besides maybe, obviously teaching and in security. So I think that's part of it too, that we were able to just maintain our buildings on a year-to-year basis and not reach out for bonds. But regarding this slide, obviously the red is the actual tax levy that we presented to the taxpayers. The black line would be the maximum on a year-to-year basis. And I think this slide is important. It really shows how it can fluctuate on a year-to-year basis. If you look at the 18-19 school year, the max was almost 4.6%. And then if you look at 16-17, it was down to 0.43%. And again, take a look at that January presentation. I'll give you a little more details, but essentially it's the factors. It's consumer price index on a year-to-year basis, which obviously can fluctuate. And that 16-17 school year, it was a 0.12% CPI. So those changes can really affect a school district. In terms of enrollment, just taking a look into next year, we are projecting a slight decrease from the current year projected in the following year. But as you can see, again, we'll take a little bit of a decrease into 21-22, but you can see it kind of floats on the way up for 22 to 25. So there's a projection based on the long-range planning study of an increase going forward. Obviously, these are projections. Some of these students probably haven't been born yet. So it is a projection at this point.
And Kelly, I think the next slide will show us that it's basically a fluctuation of these students moving from one building to the other. So in the box, if you see the 462, which is Coleman Hill now, next year it's projected at 483, but then you'll see a decrease in the number of kids at Wampus, an increase in the number of kids at Crittenden, and then a decrease at the high school. So we have these cohorts of kids that are moving through. It's really hard for us to, and our enrollment reports are usually very good. This enrollment study that we rely on is usually pretty accurate. There was a lot of construction pending prior to this pandemic, so we're not really sure what that means. We had been anticipating some increases in enrollment despite the this report, but now it's a little uncertain. So basically what we were told beforehand, though, was that we were going to pretty much remain stable or increase over time. And the decrease from last year to this year, this year to next year, is really that of like 15 students, which is not significant in a K-12. Okay, that's it.
I think Jen spoke about this earlier.
Yep, that is our proposed budget. And I think, when you're looking at taxes for individual municipalities, whether you live in Bedford or Pleasantville or North Castle, just know that the board is still waiting on whatever our final calculations are going to be before they approve a budget, which I think is a very conscious position to put themselves in, and I appreciate, as a superintendent, that level of investigation on the part of the board. And that is all we have for you today. And 25 people are still here. That's amazing. I thank you all for listening. If you have any specific questions about the budget, or you'd like to know in more detail any aspect of it, definitely reach out to Kelly Seibert or myself. And just thanks very much for coming today, everyone. Kim, thanks for having us. All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.